Good evening. I'm calling this meeting to order. This is a Redmond City Council study session held on Tuesday, June 9th, 2026, commencing at 6 p.m. All council members and Mayor Bernie are in attendance. There are 5 items on the agenda tonight, and tonight's a little bit shorter topics. It's kind of like a glorified committee meeting, folks. It's gonna have a little bit different pace, but we'll have some fun. The first item on the agenda is the grant thresholds, followed by the park impact fee, schedule updates, the public art master plan, Vision Blueprint 2050, and council talk time. So for the grant thresholds, Deputy Director of Equity and Strategic Services, Zach Hoovner, will introduce the team. Thank you.
Thank you, Council President. Pleased to introduce Lauren Thompson, our grant supervisor, Amanda LaSalle, grant coordinator, and Jeanette St. Paul, capital and grant analyst, to introduce this item. I will be pulling up the PowerPoint here shortly.
Good evening, council members. My name is Lauren Thompson. I'm the grant supervisor. I will be conducting the presentation tonight just for sake of one person speaking and swiftness through the presentation, and then all 3 of us are present to answer any questions you may have. Perfect. So I'm going to walk through the current challenges that we face in our grant approval process and present a recommendation for establishing a grant threshold. The goal is to streamline our ability to pursue smaller grants by reducing administrative burden while still maintaining strong oversight and transparency. Our current council workflow process includes 3 touch points: internal committee, committee of the whole, and the consent meeting. Typically, it results in a 5 to 6 week minimum before an item can be approved. This long timeline affects our ability to implement grants effectively, especially those with short turnaround requirements or limited performance periods. Finance conducted a cost analysis of the council approval process for contracts that estimates a total cost of $3,000 or $3,411.95. This means that for smaller grant awards, it costs the city more to accept the award than the award value. Some departments have stopped applying for smaller grants entirely because the administrative time required to take a grant through council is not cost effective. Staff have consistently expressed the need for a grant threshold that would allow them to pursue low-dollar opportunities while being fiscally responsible. The grants team recommendation is to establish a $50,000 threshold for all grants, with a few important exceptions. Grants will still go to council for award acceptance if they require unbudgeted matching funds, create any future staffing or operational commitments, or if the grantor explicitly requires council acceptance prior to execution. CIP grants are significantly larger awards, so different thresholds are not necessary. Using a single threshold across all grants is intentional. It simplifies the process, provides clarity for staff, and reduces the need for interpretation. Creating category-based exclusions would add complexity rather than support efficiency. One important point we want to highlight is that this threshold aligns with our existing professional services procurement limits. Today, department leadership already has the authority to spend up to $50,000 without coming to council. However, what they cannot do under current structure is bring revenue into the city, like grant funds, of any amount without council approval. So the authority to execute expenditures up to $50,000 already exists, but the authority to accept funding does not. This recommendation simply brings those 2 processes into alignment. It allows staff to apply for, accept, and fully execute grant agreements up to $50,000 under the same level of delegated authority they already have for spending. Council will still review and approve the budget authority through the quarterly budget adjustment process before any grant funds are spent. Finance's analysis shows it costs the city about $3,412 in staff time and administrative work each time a contract goes to council. This does not include the added cost of administering the grant itself once awarded. If you compare this cost to the value of small grant awards, the burden becomes clear. For example, the effort to approve a $6,000 grant represents roughly 62% of the grant's value. For a $12,000 grant, it's 31%. At $50,000, the administrative cost is about 7.5%. National data shows that local governments typically spend between 7 to 10% of the grant award on administration. By reducing the number of small grants that must go through council individually, we reduce administrative costs, avoid agenda congestion, and improve our ability to meet short execution deadlines, which is especially important for some state agencies with turnaround times as short as 45 days. Implementing the proposed threshold still allows for strong internal controls. Staff must get approval from their department leadership and from the appropriate governance body before they apply for a grant. This ensures each application aligns with city priorities and operational capacity. For operating grants, the Grant Oversight Committee reviews the pre-application request and typically provides approval within 24 to 48 hours. With the proposed threshold in place, once a grant is awarded and after internal review of the grant agreement, the mayor, COO, or delegated authority will execute the grant agreement. The grant will then be reported to council during quarterly budget adjustment process. In the rare case that the timing requires earlier notification, a standalone update can be provided. Most importantly, council still maintains authority. Grant funds will not be spent until the budget authority adjustment has been approved. Historically, council has approved roughly 18 new grants per year. Based on past data, about 5 of those typically fall under the proposed threshold, on average about 1 to 2 grants per quarter. Under the threshold, staff would still report each small grant during the quarterly budget adjustment process, including details such as the name of the award, the amount, purpose, the grantor, etc. This slide shows a breakdown of the grants under $50,000 that the city received in 2024, 2025, and so far in 2026. Out of these 16 grants under the proposed threshold, only 1 did not meet the other requirements due to having ongoing costs. The grants highlighted in bold are considered recurring, meaning that the city typically receives these grants year over year. Our grant processes continue to strengthen. The new internal grant management policy and procedures launched in April provides a clear operational structure for grant award acceptance and contract review and execution. Every grant goes through contract review, which typically includes department leadership, the grants team, finance, and the city's attorney's office. This ensures that issues like financial obligations, legal liabilities, and operational capacity are identified early. The grants team supports departments from award through closeout, providing compliance support and ongoing technical assistance. Looking forward, the implementation of grant management software will add another layer of oversight by tracking deliverables and deadlines, as well as staff grant compliance training planned as part of our 2027 work plan. Ultimately, this threshold allows us to reduce administrative costs, avoid delays, and free up council and staff time, while maintaining transparency, strong controls, and council oversight where it truly matters. Today, we are asking council for the following. Approve the establishment of the $50,000 grant threshold to go for approval for the July 7th regular business meeting. Approve the associated updates to the delegated contract authority and provide any feedback on how council would like to see the quarterly budget adjustment reporting structured. If adopted, the grants team will update the internal policy and begin communicating the changes to departments. We're happy to answer any questions you have.
Thanks so much, Lauren. Really appreciate it. And the council has had a couple touches on this. Really helpful to see the full recommendation come back tonight, and excited to see where the conversation takes us. So, council, are there any questions for the team tonight? We also have a matrix in our packet if there are unanswered questions or new questions as a result of the matrix. Now would be a great time to bring those up. Councilmember Kritzer.
Thank you so much for the presentation and for coming back to us with this recommendation. One thing that I would want to see before we would move forward with this is actually the actual legislation of what we would be approving. So we have the recommendation here, but actually what specifically would be written in to enact this in our code. So that would be helpful. For me, I think my outstanding question, which I saw some response to in the matrix around, which I had raised at the committee meeting around whether we have the ability on certain types of grants to be able to see grants regardless of the dollar threshold. I'm thinking about it more. I'm wondering, just given the current exceptions that we have, whether there's the possibility of adding an exception. I think specifically we have here, that if there were, if it obligates unbudgeted matching funds, if it creates future staffing or operational commitments, or if it requires council acceptance. But I'm wondering if, because I really think my biggest concern is if we're accepting a grant to do something fundamentally new and that the council hasn't given direction on. There may be things we're doing that are new that the council has given direction on. So for example, we might have passed in our budget that we want to be able to fund a new initiative, and then the staff goes out and gets an amazing grant to be able to help fund that. Actually, when we look at, for example, the timeline that you showed, there's examples like that. Like, for example, we passed Vision Zero. We went out and got Target Zero funds. That wouldn't be something that would kind of fall under what I'm envisioning. But there may be something where we actually are doing something new that the council hasn't given specific direction on, where the grant is kind of ahead of that decision. And so I'm wondering if we could add something, and I think this is where I'd love to see like what exactly we are passing if we move this forward, would be to add something that specifies exception if the council, if it is a new type of expenditure, if it would require a new type of expenditure related to something that the council has not yet given specific direction on, or given direction on. I guess specific is a little bit tricky because it might be that we didn't envision one particular path, and I think we'd want to give a little leeway for that, but I think if we could find the right wording, that would be something that I would be interested in.
Mayor Bernie and then Councilmember Forsyth.
You can contemplate, usually it'd be like if we had a new program, then that would require action before we could go out and get grants for it. Is that kind of what you're thinking about?
Yeah,
The
well,
program is kind of the terminology we would use if it wasn't something that was already approved of and gone through all the processes.
I think there's a couple more council questions on this topic, but that's a good suggestion. We'll go to Councilmember Forsyth first.
Thank you. Yeah, I have similar thoughts to Councilmember Kritzer on this. I appreciate that it says that the grants would have to align with our values, but sometimes the process through which we agree to get to those values can differ wildly. So I too want to see some language that says if it's a new program, if it's a new grant for something that we haven't done before, the recurring ones that we've already approved, I think that's okay. A future council may not think that. So I'm struggling with this one a bit just for that reason as well. And then going down to my matrix question H1, which was about council liaison, I really feel strongly that in this process, maybe it doesn't have to be within that 24 to 48 hour window that you mentioned, but you said there's usually a 2-week window. Maybe the person that gets checked in with is the FAC chair, or there's a dedicated council liaison, just to get a touch of, does this feel in alignment with what your understanding of council values are, or maybe it's council leadership that has that role. I don't know where that role lies, but I feel fairly strongly about a touch with a council member.
Councilmember Prakria.
Thank you, and thank you for the detailed reply to my matrix questions. I'm looking at the answer to J1 right now, which says that the city manages approximately 45 grants annually and receives an average of 18 new grants each year. Of these, only about 5 on average fall under 50,000. So I guess I kind of have a two-parter. Number one, just to clarify, this would only apply to around 5 grants a year, and then
Correct.
number two, I mean, I assume it has happened before, but how often does a grant actually come to council and council reject this grant? And is this more common on average for grants under this $50,000 threshold? Maybe this is a question for my colleagues, but just wanted to ask that.
Yeah, I can refer to Zach or Mayor Bernie, but since I have been here for a year, I don't think there has been a grant that has come forward to council that they have said no to. And no, there's no difference between, is it often something's under the 50,000 that is getting said no to? I don't think there's a difference between the amount of the award.
Yeah, I'll go ahead and chime in with partly is a response and partly one of my own questions or offerings to the conversation. The last grant that I can remember the council really deliberating whether or not to approve was the state dollars for the ALPR program, which spun off another policy question before we were willing to accept those grant dollars. So it's been a couple years, and that was above this threshold anyway. So I had a similar kind of curiosity as some of my colleagues when I came into the room, but I did have that technology kind of example or prototype in my mind. I actually think that it is worth pursuing having this kind of threshold so that the team can be more efficient and that more teams will be willing to take on the work to explore, so that maybe it's not 5, maybe next year it's 10 of these smaller awards over time. I would like to be working toward that. When I read the creates future staffing or operational commitments, I wondered about or purchases a new type of technology, because I do think we could come up around something that is a piece of technology and maybe it's $45,000 for that piece of technology, but it's new to us, and these have proven to be topics that are worth conversation. So that was one of my curiosities. That's kind of similar to, is it a new program or a new type of expenditure? New technology was a piece for me. Councilmember Parsi, thanks for your patience.
Thank you. Yeah, to add on to kind of the exceptions list, I too on my email shared a list of concerns for what I thought should be part of the exceptions. So I just wanted to add a couple of them. For example, requiring repayment from the city or requiring the city to assume ownership or operation of something that wasn't previously assessed, or creating litigation or regulatory or environmental risks potentially. So I would like to, similar to how we had ground rules discussed for our budget conversation, I think it would be really beneficial to be able to see a full list of ground criteria that we all agree on, that these would be a comprehensive list of what still needs to come to the council regardless of the budget amount. So I think having that would bring the confidence to have to have this conversation with more confidence, I would say.
Councilmember Parsi, can I ask you to restate what are the categories? I heard environmental risk. There was another before that.
Yeah, I have shared a detailed list with staff in email, but if I wanted to kind of summarize my email, requiring the city to assume ownership of new operations or maintenance or assets, for example, that previously the city did not have. So that is part of it. Requiring potential kind of, for example, committing the city to new policies or privacy potential challenges that, for example, with ALPR, the topic that we had was a privacy challenge that wasn't part of the norms of what the city operated in previously, potentially affecting sensitive populations or having land use policies in ways not previously authorized, potentially involving naming rights or potentially other matters traditionally reserved for council. I don't know the full list. I think there is a lot to kind of think about. That's why I think it would be really beneficial to kind of write that set of ground rules to make sure that we feel confident with what we're agreeing to.
I appreciate that, Councilmember Parsi, and I think where we're going in the next few minutes with this conversation is either giving direction to staff on a couple more exceptions we're interested in and a chance to see the legislation before adopting next month, or we're going to decide not to pursue this threshold at all and continue to see every grant. Let me check for understanding from the staff perspective. That's, I think, where we are with this decision. Okay. Just to kind of wayfind with where we're going tonight, I think that'd be helpful. Council Vice President, I saw your hand up.
Thank you. For clarification on some of the topics that Councilmember Parsi was just bringing up, aren't some of those covered in the grant committee inside of that process?
Yes.
Great, thank you.
Thank you. Other questions or comments? Before I go to Mayor Bernie, if everyone's okay with that. Oh, Councilmember Forsyth.
All right. I appreciate the clarification from Vice President Uwimana. I still don't necessarily understand what that means, though.
So, Lauren, if we were to take the example of one that was offered was commits the city to either ownership or maintenance of a liability of some type, and it's less than $50,000, how does that show up in the committee, or how might it?
So typically during the pre-application process where, I sent this in an email, but it talks about alignment with strategic priorities, making sure it's in the approved budget outcomes, making sure that it supports certain department work plans, and it contributes to identified performance goals, things like that. When it comes to equipment, if it's under the $50,000, or if it's over the $50,000 threshold, you would still see a contract for the purchase of said equipment. If it's under that, then just like any other way of purchasing equipment, staff would be able to purchase that equipment without coming to council right? If there was no grant, they would still be able to purchase that equipment.
Great. Thank you. I appreciate that. Did you have something, Deputy Director?
No, I think yes. I think the only thing I would add is during the budget adjustment process, that would also be an opportunity for council to say yay, nay on that specific grant.
Absolutely. And Mayor Bernie, I apologize.
No, that's okay. No, they know more than I. But I would say we do have, with Lauren and team, really happily have actually some pretty great controls over grants and the work that they've done to ensure that when we are engaging in grants, it is for all the right reasons that we have approved of, that you have approved of in the budget and the programs that we have going on. The technology one I think is actually interesting because that's one of the controls we've been trying to put on, is not having staff buy things that are one-offs that create new encumbrances, new work, something that maybe we already have other equipment. So we do actually have a technology process that also to work on this. So this is really just about the grants themselves, but there are other city processes to put safeguards into place on all the programming and things that we're doing as well.
Thank you. And Councilmember Kritzer.
Thank you for this conversation. I would say, depending on which way we want to go with the exceptions, with the detail, I do think there, to Councilmember Forsyth's point about potentially having just a council member role in the process, that might help to address. We could keep the exceptions fairly streamlined, assuming that there is potentially like council leadership they get that look. I think there is precedent for, it was mentioned about like the fact chair. For example, one thing that the fact chair gets is a quarterly investment report check-in on how our investments are doing. That doesn't go to the whole council, but which I guess it could go to the whole council, because we do get those as part of like our bigger reports. But and for example, we used to have a neighborhood grant program, and got input from council president and the fact chair on that, or something like that. So I could see something like this where you might establish just a role where maybe council leadership gets notification and could give kind of thumbs up, or say, hey, this one we need to pull and bring to council. But it would allow, because it seems like the vast majority would be ones where they just say, thumbs up, aligns, go ahead, we're not going to slow the process. But if there is anything, they could kind of catch those things, and it just might be more streamlined.
Councilmember Parsi.
I think that would be great to have a council member touch, but thinking more broadly and long term, I think it would be helpful for the perspective of public transparency and showing the commitments from the city for how we accept money and how we kind of treat public funds. I think it would still be valuable. I would feel comfortable to move forward with this if we can have a comprehensive or at least a one-pager on the what we're agreeing to as base rules for what we're accepting or not accepting for grants.
Okay, so let's do a check-in. I'm going to ask for thumbs if you'd like to continue working toward having a threshold of some kind, which will include a chance to actually see the legislation alongside the other program pieces that already exist and the policies that are being proposed to support the threshold with the rest of the grant program. So it's a fair point to see the legislation that you're asking us to adopt. And there is time on an upcoming committee of the whole that I can chat with you guys about. So I'm going to ask for thumbs up if you'd like to continue the conversation. And then if we've determined that there is, let's make sure we're giving clear direction on the additional exemptions that we'd like to see added to this threshold. So is there interest in continuing the conversation moving toward the thresholds? I see 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. So that is a majority. We're going to move forward with that. So the first that was offered was to create a new, if it creates a new program or introduces a new technology that, again, council has not given direction on in the past. Thumbs up if that feels like something you'd like to see added. I'm seeing 7 thumbs all around. That's good. How about the catch-all that, and should there be questions, council leadership can give perspective on whether it should come forward to the full body, or they can make a decision. Okay, seeing that one also. Were there any others that anyone wanted to propose? Councilmember Forsyth.
All right, just recapping, did you also say it creates a new policy? Potential for a new policy?
I did not.
Okay.
Let's.
One I would like to see. Because as we've seen in the past, the ALPR situation was not thought of as a new policy, but it did end up needing a new policy.
Absolutely. So thumbs up on that, adding policy, program, and technology. Okay, so does that sound okay for the team? Okay, and I do hear, Councilmember Parsi, that you have some other interests as well. Are there any that you would like to propose here to see if the group would like to support? This is a good list? Okay, awesome, thank you. So I think we did it, folks. Thank you so much, and thanks to the team. There is time I see a hand, but let me just quickly finish. There is time on the Parks Committee of the Whole, if you all are able to bring back the legislation for a quick touch before we move in July. Yes, Councilmember Parsi.
Sorry, I just caught one line that maybe might be interesting to you guys. The item that I wrote was potentially negatively impacting our progress towards Redmond 2050 goals by, for example, taking staff time away from other critical items that would be making progress towards Redmond 2050. So that was one other item that I had that I don't know if it was covered.
I appreciate that, and I think I heard the mayor say earlier that that's kind of covered in the rest of the process, but in all fairness, I will ask the council, is that a new grant that would distract from progress on Redmond 2050? Is that language that we feel needs to be added to this threshold? Councilmember Kritzer?
I think which we'll have to see the language and maybe we'll want to refine it, but the creating future staffing or operational commitments to me feels like it might cover that, because it's like if it's gonna create new commitments that then would take away. And I think also if we have the new criteria that's related to outside of what council is directed, then it is also related because council is given direction for our decisions to be guided by Redmond 2050. But we might look when we see the things and add like a little specification there, in my opinion.
Councilmember Procria?
I feel like this falls into other buckets, and I would also caution against adding too many things because the whole point of this was to save staff time and to save money. And if we go to staff and say, hey, you have to tell us all of these things about the grant, it seems totally counterproductive. So I would just prefer to keep it as streamlined as possible to align with the set goals of this proposal.
Okay. Any other thoughts? Yeah, go ahead, Lauren.
I was just going to add one thing. If it would be helpful, I can also send our pre-approval or pre-application approval process that kind of outlines. I did a little bit in the email, the criteria, but if you'd like to see it, I think that would help also frame the understanding of like the things that we think about and the things that we're discussing before we even apply for a grant. I'd be happy to send that to council as well to help with some understanding there.
Awesome. I think that's super helpful. And just because I keep being reminded, I wanted to offer some positive reinforcement also, which is that if any grant could help bring us new assets that we're happy to maintain that include, electric street sweepers and electric anything, including, lawn maintenance equipment. And all of those are items that this council has given very clear direction on, and we have a lot of policies to support. And those would be examples of property that we'd be happy to take ownership of and maintenance over because it would help us reach our goals faster. So we're going to see this again, possibly in committee later this month. Any final thoughts before we wrap up this conversation for tonight? Zach, Deputy Director.
Just a logistical question. So yes, PES is on June 23rd. It would be a very quick turnaround. I'm assuming that we could draft some language and share in time for that. But yes, I know that there's time on that committee. So we can do our best to get that over and go through that process.
Understand it's a short turnaround. If you are able to make that one with the legislation, but it does sound like their council would like to see it before it goes to consent. Great. Awesome. Thanks, team. Really appreciate your time. Have a great evening. Yes, Council Vice President.
Thank you. Team, before you leave, I want to just point out, thank you for working with us, for collaborating, for hearing, for listening to hear what's underneath the words, to get the spirit behind it, and to be willing to work alongside of us. So thank you.
Thank you. All right, the second item on our agenda tonight is the park impact fee schedule update, and our Parks Planning Manager, Lindsay Falkenberg, will introduce this item, and she's bringing her team along with her. Welcome.
Yes, thank you, Council President Stewart, Council Vice President Nueva Camina, council members. We're pleased to be here tonight to discuss the parks process for updating our impact fee methodology and seek your feedback and direction. And since our Parks Director, Lorraine Hamilton, is under the weather and joining us online, I'm happy to introduce our crew tonight. I'm Lindsay Falkenberg, the Parks Planning Manager, and I'm joined by Cameron Zapata, Parks Senior Planner, and we're also joined by our consultants from FCS, and I'm going to pass it off to John to introduce himself. And there's a little button there for you to hit when you're ready. Oh, fabulous.
I'm John Ghilarducci, a principal with FCS. I'm joined by Zach Hazel, who's been our project manager on the project. So we'll do a little bit of brief background, I will, on impact fees, and then we'll move right into some additional background, and then Zach will walk through the analysis to date. Slide, please. So impact fees, as a quick refresher, these are the one-time fees paid at the time of development by new development. They fund growth-related capital projects, and we can only use them on capital projects for parks, transportation, fire, and schools. And tonight, of course, we're talking about parks. Back to you, Lindsay.
And so our goal tonight is to review the options of the different impact fee methodologies that are under consideration, and in preparation for bringing forward an ordinance this fall to update the impact fee schedule to our Redmond Municipal Code. Just to talk about the project process, this project kicked off in late January of this year, and we met with our project subject matter expert group, which consists of folks from our parks planning team, park operations, finance, and planning. The SMEs helped to gather data asked for by FCS to inform the different methodologies and calculate the different fee rates. FCS then came back to staff to walk us through the process and the results and gathered feedback from staff to incorporate into the next iteration of the impact fee rates. We're now in the public engagement phase of this project, and this phase looks a little different from your typical engagement efforts. Typically, the impact fee schedule and methodology would have been updated during our park plan update back in 2023. However, due to time constraints, it was determined that impact fees should be updated by a standalone project. This update is based on extensive community engagement that occurred during the park plan update and is intended to see us through to the next park plan update when other rounds of community engagement will commence in 2028. As a result, the public engagement of this project is focused on receiving input from the Parks, Trails, and Recreation Commission and Council and informing interested parties such as One Redmond and Master Builders Association. To date, staff and FCS has presented the results to the Parks, Trails, and Recreation Commission, and they shared that they would want to see an impact fee amount that does not negatively affect the development of housing, both affordable and market rate. And so tonight we're here with council presenting these possible methods to receive your feedback. And then in the next couple months, we plan to partner with FIRE as they're also going through their impact fee updates to brief interested parties on both of our updates. So the park plan is the foundation to our park impact fees. It identifies parks' capital projects needs to serve the anticipated growth to meet level of service goals, and only projects listed in an approved plan, like the park plan, are eligible to be funded by the park impact fees. When we update the impact fee methodology, we use the park plan's project lists, cost estimates, and service level standards to determine what portion of those growth-related improvements can be funded by those fees. As a reminder, our current level of service standards relate to walkability and acres of parkland per 1,000 residents. In short, the park plan sets the capital needs, and the impact fee update translates those needs into fee rates that support growth-related improvements. And then just to give you a sense of the types of projects in the park plan's 6-year CIP and 20-year CIS, this slide shows a few examples. And these include some of our in-process and recently completed projects, along with proposed and upcoming projects. And then we also have some longer-term examples as part of the 20-year CIS, and this includes development of new parks within the East Redmond corridor, Sammamish Valley Park development, and then the future community center space in Overlake.
So as John mentioned, I'm Zach Hazel, and I'm here to talk about the results part of the impact fee analysis. So we took two approaches to do this analysis. What we're calling right here on this slide is called the current park impact fee approach. It basically replicates the existing methodology for the park impact fee, but with updated numbers from the new data that we have. So in this approach, we look at the overall growth in park users and the estimated hours of use of those different kinds of users to get the total hours of parks use planned for in the planning period. We then divide those hours up into the different categories on this, going down to this lower section here. And we multiply the share of each category of user by the overall development share of CIP. That's the projects that are relevant to development. We take that multiplication, divide it by the number of new units, in this case measured in 1,000 square feet. That could be commercial, that could be residential, regardless of type. And that division results in the impact fee per 1,000 square feet of new development. So that's the background to the existing methodology. This next slide here shows you the actual numbers here. So you can see that we're planning for growth of 29,000 residents, 44,000 employees at 5.5 hours of parks use per week for residential and 2.0 hours of parks use for non-residential. That's a total hours of 250,000-ish hours of parks use. This lower section here, you can see you can see the breakdown by category of parks user: residential, industrial, and non-industrial. And we multiply that by the growth-related portion of the capital improvement program, $116.5 million, and divide that by the total growth in square footage of about 23,587,000. And that gives us the final fees that you see on the far right, $3,194 per 1,000 square feet for residential, for example, $224 for industrial, and $1,500 for non-industrial commercial development. And again, that is the current approach, but with the updated numbers from our new data sources. We also took a look at what we're calling, for the purposes of this presentation, a more standards-based impact fee approach, slightly more common in the state of Washington. And here we have the fee broken out into its different components. We have the future project component on the far left here. This looks at the eligible cost of those capacity increasing facilities that you're planning. And we divide that by the growth in system demand. Then we have the existing asset component, which looks at the capacity of facilities that you already have, which is not considered in your current park impact fee approach, but is under this approach. That is also divided by the growth in system demand. And then finally, we subtract out any adjustments for outstanding debt in this case, and for the outstanding fund balance of the park impact fee program. All of those together is the park impact fee per unit of development. So in terms of numbers, we took two approaches here. One is based on the longer-term 20-year project plan. And you can see, for example, that the future project component in that case is that $116.5 million that you were looking at before on the current impact fee approach. And we're expecting 33,862 residential equivalents. That's the growth in system demand throughout the 20-year planning period. Residential equivalents might pique your interest there. That is the combination of planned residents and planned employees, with a small reduction factor applied to the employees to account for the fact that they use parks less than residents. We add to that the existing asset component, which was calculated to be $31.5 million, once again divided by the growth of 33,862 residential equivalents. We subtract out the adjustments per residential equivalent. And finally, you get the impact fee on the far right, you can see there, of $3,783 per residential equivalent. Now, I'll just note here, that is not the fee that the typical single-family residence would see, which we'll show you that in a couple slides. This is per residential equivalent. So, for example, per resident who might be living in a single-family residence, for example. Next slide here is another approach, but this time focused on a much shorter time span, only looking at the next 6 years of projects. So what you'll notice about this is, of course, that the future project component is much less at $51.5 million. The existing asset component is pretty similar, 31.8, and the adjustments are the same. The big change is in the bottom, in the denominator, where you can see that the denominator is now much smaller at 9,109 residential equivalents, since we're only looking at 6 years of growth. So because of the way division works, when the denominator goes down here and the numerator doesn't go down at the same proportion, you actually see an increased fee per residential equivalent, which is somewhat counterintuitive. But basically, you've got a more defined project list for the next 6 years, and you've got a smaller growth in that time period. And so that actually results in a higher fee than if you were to look at this on a 20-year time frame. So $6,959 per residential equivalent. And then finally, to complete my material here, we have a comparison of park impact fees for a single-family residential unit. In the very middle of this chart is Redmond in the yellow. That's your current impact fee per single-family residence. Then if you look all the way to the left, you see $4,876. That is the current approach, but with the updated numbers for a single-family residence, so smaller than your current charge. On the far right here, you can see that we have the 20-year at $8,290 per single-family residence. And then finally, if you were only to do a 6-year implementation program, you're looking at $15,000, so much, much higher for a single-family residence. And speaking of which, one final thing I'll close on, maybe I didn't mention this earlier, is the fact that what we're calculating here is the maximum defensible park impact fee for these different approaches. So obviously you have the authority to charge anything up to the maximum. You are not obligated to charge the maximum fees that we're calculating. So maybe think of this less as picking the fee that you want to charge between these three. These are three approaches we took, and they yielded three different maximum legally defensible charges, but you have the authority to charge anything up to those maximums.
Thank you all for explaining that. I know this is a condensed presentation because we can only send so many slides, and we had a longer one included in your packet, but we would love to take any questions and help clarify this.
Thank you. I see lots of hands, so we'll get started and appreciate the conversation. Councilmember Parsi, you're first.
Yeah, I have two questions. I'll start with the kind of quick, easy one. I would love to hear what is the feedback from the Parks Trails Commission, and my second question, and kind of how we've incorporated their feedback. And also my second question is, what other methodologies did we consider for calculating the impact fees? And how did we land on this one, and what makes this one a better solution for Redmond specifically?
Yeah. I can take the first one and then take a stab at the second one, and then maybe you all can back me up. So we presented a very similar presentation to PTRC. They had a couple pieces of feedback, one of which I think kind of affirmed our community engagement strategy, which is that they were like, this is very technical, why are you telling us about it? But once we dug in a little bit more, I think their thought was, well, we want to make sure that we're balancing housing needs in Redmond with park needs in Redmond. So, you know, looking at these options, what's going to help us get there? That was kind of their biggest piece of feedback. And I think feeling that this is quite technical was their other piece of feedback. And then in terms of your second question, you all can and maybe talk more about other methods, but I will say one of the reasons that the aligning the standards approach feels aligned to us is because in the current park plan, our levels of service are based off of spatial standard levels of service, right? So it's about walkability, it's about access to a certain number of acres per resident. And the current approach that they shared is based off hours of service, which is not a level of service that we currently have or a metric we have in our park plan. But the approach recommended around our CIP projects feels much more aligned in terms of being about our assets and being about these big CIP projects that we do to add specifically spatial, I guess, yeah. What'd you say? Capacity, yes, thank you, within our level of service system. So I don't know what you all want to add to that, but that's my layperson take.
We calculated one additional approach that we all decided was not worth providing for today, but we looked at the overall cash investment in the system and used that as a basis for the level of service. So that's more looking at what have you spent to date and only focusing on that for the calculation of a park impact fee. And it just wasn't as relevant to the staff's goals. And then also speaking to the advantages of our proposed approach, the standards-based approach, that also yields this is kind of on a back-end thing, but it yields a higher eligibility percentage of your projects. We're going into much more greater detail to determine what is growth's fair share of these planned projects, and then that means that you can spend more of your park impact fee on those projects than you would under your current approach.
Thank you. Councilmember Prakriya?
Thank you for the presentation. I'm on slide 6, the current park impact fee approach. Right now, I'm just trying to follow along with the math. I guess, what is the relevancy of the top line? The growth in park users times hours of use equals total hours, because I just don't see how that applies to actually calculating the.
Yeah, that's a fair point. So this is an outline of how we did the math on the back end. The math was a little bit more tricky where we're combining different data sources, and so we needed a step to get to total hours to then send that down to the hours by category. So sorry, not as clear on the slide. That was more of a back-end calculation connection.
Oh, okay, so that's how we got to the percentages then.
Yeah, right, exactly. So we get the total hours from this top half, and then we have another data source that we use to connect to the hours by category.
I see. Okay, thank you.
Councilmember Kritzer?
Thank you so much for the work on this. One question that I have comparing between the different methodologies, if we're thinking about changing, is how do you compare the potential for variability over time between the different methodologies?
So, yeah, sorry. The 20-year plan, right, is with it being a much longer-term look, tends to be more stable over time. You know, you're not going to see big fluctuations in the overall cost of the plan when you're looking out that far. If you were to adopt the 6-year plan, then, you know, come 6 years, you're going to have a brand new set of projects, and that's going to result in potentially a big swing in the impact fee, right?
And how does that compare to, like, with our current methodology as well? This new methodology versus the current?
So the current methodology was based off of an older park plan, and the thinking there was that it would be updated more frequently than it is. That's what I can say about that. So it's perhaps a little dated relative to the actual needs of the system.
Thank you. Councilmember Forsyth?
Thank you. Just to level set us real quick, how frequently do we look at these? I know we look at impact fees all the time, and I just can't remember the last time we looked at this one.
Yeah, so our last impact fee within parks was in 2017, and again, the hope, I think, had been that it would be the methodology would be updated in 2023 when we redid the park plan, but it wasn't. And I think the hope here is that we set a methodology that aligns with our park plan, and so then when we go into our next park planning process in 2028, we don't have to redo our methodology. Instead, as we readjust our, whether it's the 6-year CIP or the 20-year CIS, the fee might shift and get recalculated, but the methodology itself would stay the same. Because, you know, we hope to maintain the same levels of service standards. And I also see that Director Hamilton has her hand up online.
Yes, Director Hamilton, welcome.
Yeah, excuse me. Director Hamilton here. Lindsay covered the lion's share, but I think the only historical piece I might offer is that if those of you who were on council at the time recall, back in 2022, we did have a director change as we were really getting into the park plan. And so as we had both a director change as well as a park planning manager change, this was something that was not identified in that park plan scope. So it was an administrative miss is what I would say in that process. And the goal is for this park impact fee, like Lindsay was just saying, to come through at every park plan update, that it would align, and that as we're adopting a new park plan, we're adopting a new park impact fee rate and updating that as we go. So it should continue to be aligned into the future.
Okay, thank you. I have two more if I may.
Yeah, go ahead, Councilmember Forsyth.
Thank you. So you had mentioned the other strategy that staff deemed not as relevant to this process. Can you elaborate on why it was deemed not as relevant? Because when you described it, I was like, ooh, that's the information I want.
Yeah, I believe the fee was much lower than any of the proposals we showed you today, so perhaps not something the city would be interested in implementing, but also, as the staff has been describing, it doesn't align with the look at the inventory as the basis of the park impact fee. It only looks at the cash invested in the system rather than the actual assets of the system.
I see. I was figuring it had to do with inflation as well, so that makes some sense. Okay, last question I had. The 20-year scenario, is that a fixed fee, that $3,783? Will that be fixed for 20 years, or does that fluctuate? Just a little more information on that would be helpful for me.
So you should index it with inflation, for sure. As your project costs go up, your park impact fee should rise with it.
Okay.
And then I was talking earlier how it'd be more stable. It would be more stable, but you should still update it as your park plan, gets updated and go back and add new projects.
Okay, so that's the information I was looking for. We've been doing everything to inflationary, so appreciate that.
Thank you. Councilmember Soni.
Thank you so much. For me, I'm thinking of a scenario. Like these days, I'm seeing all the developers, they're also putting up a park or, those structures as a part of their development. And in these kinds of scenarios, I assume they are given impact fee credits. So if we are imposing these impact fees and pushing our developers to start taking a route where they prefer to start building up something of this own rather than paying the impact fee. So question is, are we ready to have that kind of to handle that influx? Do you, what do you anticipate? Is this going to move the developers going towards that route versus paying the impact fee that we are going to propose?
So what you're referring to is that when a developer wants to waive their impact fees, they can work with the city to develop a POPs, which I can never, a privately owned public space. And so, they have that option, and Astera Park is our kind of current example of that, although we have some other opportunities as well. That is something we would love to see developers do more of, and in fact, the public engagement that we have planned, one of the things we would like to present during that public engagement is, what is a POPs? What are your opportunities there? And Cameron and I are working closely on making sure that we have an SOP for developing POPs in the future. But I think especially in the Overlake area where purchasing land for park use is going to be really challenging. Having opportunities to work with developers on POPs is really something that we would like to see more of. That answers your question.
So do we prefer them to make those POPs rather than the impact fees? I'm just confused here.
I think maybe it depends. So when we get a request to work with a developer on a POPs, we assess it, right? Is it within an area where we already have a lot of parks, for example, and it wouldn't really increase our level of service? Or are they asking for a waiver that doesn't really align with what they're offering? Those are things that we're thinking about as we go through that process and consider writing or creating a development agreement with a developer. And sometimes it's a really good opportunity, right? I think Astera is a good example of that because we had no prospects of having a park down in Overlake, and then because of a development agreement with that group, we were able to create a park down there. So we are being discerning about when a POPs is appropriate and when it's not. But I think we already are initiating those with the impact fees that we have, and I think. I guess you all could maybe speak to whether you think an increase in impact fees. I don't know. I don't know that we know exactly what the outcome of that is going to be in terms of an increase in POPs, but it's possible that we would see more developers interested in it. And then.
Councilmember Soni, can I clarify your question? Because I think the question that I heard you asking was that developers are often asked to also build park-like amenities within their developments. Is that what I hear, as a requirement of their development? Is that what you're asking?
So my question was more that to get the impact fee credits, if the developers, they start building. So are we ready for that? Because in this case, city is also losing that impact fee. And then are we ready to have those many parks as well?
Understood. Yeah, Lindsay answered that question very well. And what I would say is that if they build a privately operated public space that, like Lindsay is discussing here, something like Astera Park, they go through a master planning process with the community, and it still has to be in line with our park plan and our levels of service. And so we're heavily involved with the development of that agreement and the development of that park. So that's a big piece to be aware of. So, we did have, for example, we've had developers approach us and what they're proposing really doesn't meet our level of service. It's in an area we maybe don't need a park. And so in that case, we talk about the need for the impact fee where we're able to invest it more strategically is the preference. And so it is definitely something we consider. But yeah, I just wanted to make sure that we were answering the correct question.
Thank you. Council Vice President?
Thank you. Have we, curiosity on this, if we have sought any input from our longstanding developer partners that we've had, or what is the expected response from the development community with changing the methodology?
Well, we haven't talked to them yet. Is it not on? Okay. Hopefully that's better. If history's a guide, well, we're seeing some really big numbers in these park impact fees around the region. And in comparison, these are relatively modest. Now, often they're not adopted. They'll adopt a rate that's much lower than the legally defensible maximum that Zach was talking about. But we will often hear from the master builders some concern about increases in impact fees. One of the things they ask for is perhaps when there's going to be a significant increase, they be phased in over a period of time instead of an immediate full implementation. But we haven't heard pushback on the methodologies. These are all sound methodologies, and the approach that we're taking here is the most common in the region, along with the cash investment approach.
Cameron, go ahead.
And we do also plan to meet with interested parties such as master builders and One Redmond in the next couple months.
Thank you. So I'll go ahead and jump in with a couple of my comments here at the end of round one, but I do see other hands. So I appreciate the conversation. And maybe Cameron, could you remind us, or Lindsay, from the conversation here tonight, you still have more engagement to do. When will this conversation be back in front of the council?
Yeah, so we do currently have on the calendar to return in July to Committee of the Whole. So we could come back with an update on what we heard during public engagement, and also to address any follow-up questions that you have. And then we're also hoping to return in September for approval of an ordinance on our updated impact fee.
Great, thank you. Thank you so much to my colleagues who have asked some of the great questions. I just wanted to offer my support of the new approach. Specifically, I wish I was wearing my What About Overlake t-shirt tonight, because this is all about the capacity of the system in the places that are going to experience more of the growth and where build out is going to be more expensive than it has been in the past. So I did just want to offer my support overall for the methodology. I do understand you have some tough conversations ahead with the development community, and you're all very gifted at your jobs. But I am curious to hear from them, not just no, not just maybe, but what does work? Is there, I appreciate the sharing of the idea of a graduated approach of some kind, or what would help make it overall more successful, because the reality is folks love living in Redmond for our incredible park system, and folks move to Redmond to raise their families because of our incredible park system. So it's all part of a big cycle. So would love to, when you come back in July, be able to hear a little bit more about that. And I also wanted, since we're discussing it, I also wanted to ask about a reminder of the park that is set for the Seritage property in Overlake. Is that ours, or that will be an example of a POPS?
That is an example of the POPS.
That's another example of a POPS. So a couple of those in Overlake then. I have a lot of hands. Did you have a comment, Mayor Bernie? Very quick, go ahead.
Yeah, real quick. I appreciate the methodology as well. I love that it aligns with our park plan. It just makes more sense. And part of what they struggled to get the data for the previous methodologies, we didn't have the data because we don't do it that way anymore. So that was part of the challenge with that. But one of the things I want to remind council of is one of them set on a 6-year CIP, one is on the CIS. Though we ideally get all our 6-year projects done in the 6-year period of time, often they do roll into the next few years. And so from a practical standpoint, it might be of interest to look at the longer time frame, just because we know we'll be able to spend the money, and they could have some challenges with being able to spend the money in that 6-period time frame. So just something to throw out there to consider.
Great, thank you. Okay, we'll go to Councilmember Parsi and then Councilmember Prakria.
Thank you. For when this item comes back to the council again, I would love to make sure that we have a clear table of comparison of the different methodologies, clearly indicating, for example, the maximum legally defensible amount, and be able to have a clear eye on how we're moving forward with our recommendation. And then one other thing I wanted to add, this is great for the council to hear that this was reviewed with the commissions, and I worry a little bit when I hear that the commissions didn't fully grasp the full material, and I would love to see if we have an opportunity to use our commissions effectively to make sure that they fully understand and feel engaged with the material and can provide meaningful feedback, especially when the council hears that the commission has provided stamp of approval. I want to make sure that the commission has fully kind of evaluated the item carefully.
Maybe I misconstrued. I think it was more that I'm not sure that there was an immediate reaction of this is our purview, was maybe more what was the immediate reaction from the commission. I'm not sure if other people remember that, but that was kind of, they were like, why us, And so maybe we didn't, and I think we did then kind of share more, well, this is why it's important that we have your feedback, and that's where we got to that point of them being like, well, we want to balance parks and we want to balance housing. But yeah, not that I think our consultants did a very good job putting it in terms that everyone was able to understand, but more maybe working to bring them into why their feedback was important. And I think that we got there. And we plan to do additional updates with PTRC on where we are at in the process. So they'll hear about our public engagement. But yeah, just to paint that picture clearly.
Thank you, Lindsay. Councilmember Prakriya?
Thank you. And I'm looking at the standards-based impact fee calculation. I'm just wondering, the second term of the existing asset component divided by the residential equivalents, why is this included if the whole philosophy is to fund future development? Why are we looking at the current existing assets?
That gets back to the levels of service approach that we took. So essentially, we looked at what level of service is going to be achieved in the city of Redmond by the end of the planning period. And that gives us a guide for how many acres of parkland you need in these different categories, right? And so what we found doing that analysis is that there is an excess of capacity in some areas of the system, which means that that is a reasonable ask to get development to buy into that capacity that's available for them. So it's a holistic approach looking at the inventory of assets that you currently have and the inventory of assets that you plan to add. So we don't want to miss either of those components.
Thank you. Did I see hands down here? Councilmember Soni.
Thank you. I will be really curious to see what is the feedback that's coming from the MBA and or also from One Redmond. I have a question regarding with the neighboring cities. In terms of our impact fee, where do we sit right now? As in we are in the kind of a middle, and then with this change, where are we going to be, with our cities, neighboring cities?
For all four impact fees? Sorry. Because, yeah, we have that for the park impact fee you see here. And,
Yeah.
and I mean, we can look a lot broader. There's a big disparity in the numbers around the state.
Yeah, we should also mention that not all cities assess impact fees, so you're not going to see Bellevue on here, for example. So I think that might be important to say too. We can't tell you what every neighboring city's impact fees are because some of them don't have impact fees. But that's the hope, is that this slide kind of shows you where both the other cities currently sit at, and also where the different options that we're presenting would sit within kind of the ecosystem of impact fees in our region.
Do we know what methods they have used?
Some we do. Some of them we did the work, or they're in the process of updating their fees. That's the other thing. This is a snapshot of where they are right now, but many of these will change soon. So many use the approach we've talked about tonight. Some have legacy methodologies they're using. The cash investment is the most common of those that we see in the region. So it's usually standards-based and the cash investment. I will say we haven't seen Redmond's current approach among these among your neighboring cities.
That is fascinating, and thank you, and thanks for the question, Councilmember Soni. You also gave me a chance to look at our current housing dashboard, which lists 5,983 units of housing, either in production or under review currently. So if that chart was sitting next to this chart, Redmond would be in a great place. I think the next hand was Councilmember Forsyth.
Thank you. In that stakeholder in conversation that's coming, and we hear back in July, is that going to include general community as well, or is that just with the development partners?
We've been hoping to partner with FIRE on this process so that we could just go once to mostly the development community to present where we're at in the process and where we're planning on going. And so it'll depend a little bit on whether we end up being able to partner with them or not. We're on a timeline that we would like to meet, and so if we're not able to align, then we will do it ourselves. I think the current intention is an invitation to the development community and One Redmond and other interested parties that this will impact to some extent to come in and hear more about the impact fee update. And I don't know that we, would kick out interested community members who show up, but yeah, open to feedback.
Okay, so the one thing I was just thinking in that feedback process, it would be great to hear by July what impact this might have on current homeowners building ADUs, because we don't want this to have a negative impact on that process, and at least I don't want to see us have a negative impact on that process, and home remodels if there's an impact there as well. Thanks.
Great. Anyone else for round two? Council Vice President, Councilmember Kritzer? Okay, final thoughts before we send the team on their way and then see them again at Committee of the Whole in July? All right, we look forward to seeing you back. Thanks so much. We'll talk again soon.
Thank you all.
Thank you. Really nice to meet you. And the third item on our agenda tonight is the Public Art Master Plan, also with our Parks team. Brittany Pratt is going to be our team captain tonight, our Recreation Business Manager. And we'll let them all settle in. Thanks for being here, everyone.
All right, thank you for having us. I'm Brittany Pratt. I'm your Recreation Business Manager, and we are here to talk about the update for the Public Arts Plan. I'll kick it off to you, Chris, whenever you're ready. He's also doing the slideshow, so I want to give him a minute to get oriented. My intro was very quick. Sorry.
All right, sorry for the technical difficulty, but we're here now. Good evening, council members. I am Chris Weber, Cultural Arts Supervisor, here with my colleagues, Brittany Pratt, who just introduced herself, Hannah Coleman, as well as Linda Flynn and Ann Berchtold from our consultant, MIG, to get your feedback as we prepare to close out our Public Art Master Plan update. Director Cochran is also here to present potential public art funding updates, and Director Hamilton is also online if needed. The planning process, just as a reminder, the planning process launched in June of 2025. From July through December 2025, we had community engagement, including stakeholder interviews, focus groups, questionnaire, and public events. December through April was used for feedback synthesis and recommendation development, and followed by full draft development and staff refinement. 2 weeks ago, we presented to you during PES, where we received feedback that we will be incorporated into the plan already, including strengthening the connection between this plan and Redmond 2050, correcting that the city is already moving forward with the Overlake Intercultural District and Marymoor Arts and Culture Districts. We kind of made it passive like that was in the future, and so we'll correct that. And today we are here to get your feedback on the draft updated plan in your memo packet, after which we will incorporate any feedback into the final plan and complete this project.
right, good evening again, Council. So today, we will be talking about what the public art plan is, how we engage with the community, and then what we heard from the community, and then an overview of the 3 framework goals that help to shape the plan, and then we will hand it off to our finance director to speak about the arts funding recommendations. As a reminder before we get started on all of that, our previous public art plan was adopted in 2017, so that would be 9 years ago. And since then, as you know, Redmond has grown by over 20,000 residents and is incredibly more culturally diverse. New development, infrastructure, investment, and a growing population are changing how people experience the city every day. This updated plan guides how public art evolves alongside that change and ensures that our public art programs keep pace with community needs, celebrate diversity, and strengthen Redmond's identity as a creative community.
First, let's talk about what a public art plan is. A public art plan guides how public art is planned, funded, delivered, and sustained over time, provides a clear framework for decision-making around public art, ensures public art is consistently integrated into community life, aligns with the city's other planning efforts, including Redmond 2050 and the Parks, Arts, Recreation, Culture, and Conservation, or PARC Plan, and takes a broad view of public art, permanent and temporary works, integrated design, performances, cultural programming, and artist-led activities. Now I will hand it over to our consultants at MIG to discuss the community engagement for this plan, as well as the findings and the 3 framework goals that guide the plan.
Thank you. So it's different than the others. You guys are tricking me. So thank you. More than 5,000 people were engaged through 60 touch points for this plan, including community events, stakeholder interviews, focus groups, questionnaires, and of course, ongoing coordination with city staff and advisory groups. Engagement occurred throughout the planning process using both in-person and virtual formats to maximize access, flexibility, and participation. And we also have community engagement that is baked into the plan as well. So the community outreach revealed a strong desire for a city that reflects residents' identities, cultures, and lived experiences through everyday public spaces, flexible cultural venues, temporary art, and vibrant programming. What we heard was clear and consistent. 91% of questionnaire respondents told us public art is important to their experience of the city. 82% told us that they prefer art that's created by local artists and community connection. That's not unusual at all. And it's also a part that public art is not necessarily the cherry on top or the art or the, the nice to have, but they really want it to be part of the daily life of Redmond. So across all 60 engagement touch points, the same 6 priorities surfaced again and again, the ones that you see up there. And together they really do shape every recommendation of this plan. So I'll talk a little bit about and introduce the 3 framework goals, and then I'll hand it over to Anne. So the vision for the public art program is really, as I said, to integrate art into everyday life through parks, trails, civic spaces, public spaces, and throughout every neighborhood. Geographic equity is something that's very important to us as public art planners and also to the city. So art in the public realm, as we know, really does strengthen city identity. It will reflect who we are as a community and who Redmond is as a community. And as Brittany said, it's become very, very diverse. Supports vibrant public life, contributes to economic vitality, and creates great gathering spaces. So implementation is woven into capital projects, into parks, open space investments, and partnerships with private development, making public art part of how Redmond is built and not added after the fact. So guided by the community input that we just talked about, the updated plan advances this vision through 3 interconnected goals focused on access, identity, cultural vibrancy, and relevancy.
So these 3 framework goals provide the core structure of the program, and they will also link artists, communities, infrastructure, and cultural programming into the system. So I'm going to hand it over to my partner, Ann.
Yeah, thank you. So building on everything that Linda just mentioned, and of course, everything that we heard from the community, I'll dive a little bit deeper into the 3 frameworks. In the plan, of course, we go into much more detail. In each section, we spell out the framework. We talk about tactics to implement these strategies, and then also how to measure these so that we can kind of go back over time and kind of ensure that we're meeting our original objectives. So the first framework goal is integrated citywide public art. And what that means and what we heard from the community is they want to see art everywhere. They want to see it in their streets. They want to see it in their parks and next to their transit, near their schools. They want it embedded in everyday opportunities as they move through the city. And not just permanent structures like public murals or sculptures, but temporary and rotating exhibitions that make the city more vibrant and active. So the plan provides for a balance of artwork in highly visible locations and neighboring gathering spaces. The residents have asked us to prioritize these everyday places, and we go into deep detail in the plan about each of the specific communities and how art can be integrated into those different communities, as well as approach for parks and streets and trails, et cetera. So some of the strategies that we put in place are to continue to integrate artwork into capital projects with an emphasis on scoping from day one. And this is really important. We go into a little bit more detail in the plan of how it's important to have Chris or Hannah on those early capital project discussions so that when you're talking about transportation or park planning or mobility, all of those have the opportunity to integrate an art component into those. So very important to have somebody in those conversations very early on. And then providing a balance with art in visible locations as well as neighborhood spots. So really, as Linda mentioned, that geographic equity, making sure that art is spread out throughout the city in a way that feels that everybody has an enriched community with cultural. And then that mix of permanent and temporary art. Permanent art is wonderful, but temporary art is what really activates space and makes the downtown feel alive, as well as parks and streets and transit. So finding that right blend of both permanent and temporary. And then continuing to ensure there is a clear pathway for private development to include and incorporate public art into their projects. We include a private developer toolkit in the back in the appendix, and talk a little bit more about how this is such a crucial opportunity for developers to really help with putting public art into the city. So making sure that that process is really easy to follow, and that at the milestone points for development, that those conversations are being had to help them integrate art into their projects. The second framework goal is artist ecosystem in Redmond. So the goal here is to have a coordinated system that connects artists to opportunities, training, and clear pathways, and broadens the definition of public art beyond traditional visual work. The team is already doing an amazing job with the artists' support in this system, in this city. There are a number of really strong programs. So we looked at those programs and really just see opportunities to keep doing what you're doing and to strengthen those programs. One of the things many artists said is they wanted to make sure that there were entry points for every point, emerging artists, established artists, and those in the middle. So looking at the programs and making sure that those pathways are pretty clear for any artist to enter. Looking at, when I say kind of broadening the definition of public art, we're talking about film and music and dance and poetry and really thinking broadly about culture and and how that definition can feed in. The creative economy is such an important part of this. Creative businesses are such an important part of this. And threading all those together so that, you're creating this cultural ecosystem. So the strategies for achieving this are rooted in finding pathways for artists at every career stage, as I mentioned. The plan will include direction for this framework, providing training and cohorts in order to build readiness for first-time public art opportunities, and supporting the continuation of a lot of the programs that already exist today. And the last framework goal is the foundation that keeps this plan durable. This one is about city systems and ensuring they provide clear governance, stable funding, and a streamlined process so the program can deliver consistently and steward the programs over time. So from the community, we heard a need for predictable processes with clear timelines, criteria, and points of contact. Values rooted in stewardship that include the care and maintenance of art and long-term planning. We had quite a lot of discussions about ensuring that as the art collection builds, there's a good system in place to maintain the works over time. And a need for centralized information, ensuring that all the processes for building the collection are streamlined. And within the plan, there is a toolkit for, again, making sure that things like deaccessioning work have a protocol that anyone can follow so that it's very easy to be consistent over time. And the plan delivers on these needs with strategies including, as I mentioned, updated art acquisition policy with clear standards. It recommends updated public art funding model, which we'll talk about in a moment. It has tools for collection management and the maintenance that I just mentioned, as well as a cross-department project delivery team to establish a coordinated group at the staff level. So with that, I'll hand that over to you, Chris.
Try that again. Thank you, Ann and Linda, and the entire team from MIG. We, the staff, along with the Redmond Arts and Culture Commission, are excited to finalize this 6-year plan and then start actualizing it. Some elements will start right away, especially beginning with those internal refinements and others like expansion of existing programs. A suggested schedule for new public art will be detailed in the plan as a 6-year public art project matrix. This matrix identifies potential public art opportunities through 2032, though those will be dependent on the budget. So with that, I'd like to hand it over to our Finance Director, Kelly Cochran, to talk you through the funding recommendation portion.
Good evening, Council. I'm excited to be here tonight. This is something that I've been working with Parks on for a really long time, watching a program that so many people support sort of struggle with the ability to deliver. And so because of financial constraints. And so I'm excited here tonight to come tonight and talk to you one more time about our proposed funding strategy for this program. So right now, our public art funding is dependent on an ordinance called the 1% for the Arts Ordinance. And what it does is essentially identify certain types of projects that qualify, which for us is facilities, essentially projects. And assesses a 1% cost based on the estimated construction of that project when it gets closer to about the 60% design. We have a very small number of these kinds of projects. We also have a very difficult time with sort of the delivery of those projects in alignment with the expected art investments. So you are all aware that there are times where our capital projects may move out. What that means then is that the planned art investment also needs to move out because its funding has been impacted. So although I have great respect for those that worked really hard to get the 1% for the arts funding in place, I think that we've just sort of grown beyond it, not only because 1% doesn't get us there anymore, but also because We just don't have enough qualifying projects or predictability. So, why don't you go to the next kind of slide? There we go. So, these two slides help to depict what was on the former slide, which is that the way that we collect for art revenues does not provide us with anything predictable, as you can see on the left. So, you know, just dependent on the size of projects and when we deliver them. It also doesn't line up with the planned spending for our art investments, as you can see on the graph on the right. And so we've got a very difficult funding structure in place for our art program to maneuver around. And so what our recommendation is that we embed our art investment projects into our capital investment program. That would mean that council and the community would have the ability to see each art project as it is being funded and moving its way through the program. Gives us an opportunity to share what we're doing, just like you see us do with our capital projects in the budget with our project information sheets. We would do that as well with art. We want to certainly, if you can go to my next slide, ensure that we provide a minimum amount of funding each year. And it may mean that funding goes to particular projects, or it may mean that it goes to the fund balance as either reserves for future projects or reserves for opportunities that may come up during the biennium. So the idea is to move away from the 1% from the art project, fund each art project as it comes through, but also ensure the program receives the amount of money that the art program or art plan is dependent upon, and build that into our structure for accountability when it comes to the budget and our other capital investments. Any questions?
Thank you so much, team. We may have questions on the earlier part, but we've got Director Cochran here, so maybe we can take the questions first on the funding scheme, if that's okay. Or the proposal, excuse me. Councilmember Kritzer and then Councilmember Soni.
Schemes.
Excuse me, Parsi.
Thank you so much. So I do appreciate the proposal, because it seems like the goal is generally to add more funding for public arts and to match this great plan with enough funding to be able to do so. I think the one thing that just had the maybe not predictability, but the consistency is that it is based in ordinance to say that we are going to fund the arts. And so I think my only concern with moving to a CIP kind of public art element is whether that will ensure that that sustains over time. And also if we start at just a certain level based on what we think is recommended, how do we make sure that grows correctly? And is there kind of something we might put in as a floor, like a minimum that would be, or something that anchors also how we generally calculate it, rather than we started at 300,000, maybe we added an inflationary factor over time. So curious to get your thoughts on that.
I agree that we would want to put into ordinance this change in funding structure. I agree that we would want to have a minimum and perhaps even a maximum, and have kind of worked with the Parks Department to ensure that the commitment that we currently have in writing for art investments, we deliver something in writing for art investments again. So I think there's a little bit of devil in the details, but I'm in agreement that an ordinance would need to come forward.
Okay, and I will say, I think a minimum makes sense. The maximum, I guess in terms of what is kind of the regular funding, could make sense, although one of the pieces here is that we could provide additional funding. So I guess overall, I would be okay if we sometimes went above and beyond.
Exactly.
So.
Right.
Appreciate that. Councilmember Parsi.
Would you be able to help me visualize how, say, we we said that we're interested in public art becoming a part of our infrastructure, for example, bridges. Would you be able to help me how this CIP funding that we would start would, say, be integrated with an existing infrastructure project?
So I can give you a couple of examples. So right now, and kind of improvements in my mind, right now, as you see, the 1% for the art projects is really limited to facility types projects. There's no requirement for transportation to invest. We've been, very lucky in the past to have some very savvy managers work to oversee our transportation infrastructure and seek those things out, but it's not a requirement. This would allow the arts program to come to the table with the transportation folks and become partners in those investments and ensure that we are looking at investments holistically throughout the city instead of limiting it to just certain types of capital projects. So we could see investments, art investments around transportation in the parks, perhaps even around the city's utilities if the criteria meets the rules of those funding sources.
Thank you. Other questions for Director Cochran's portion? Councilmember Soni.
I'm not sure if it may and may not be the finance question, and just with the, based on Councilmember Parsi's question, arts, any of these arts installations done on the bridges, I understand they will also have their intellectual property. So, the discrimination between who owns that art and how are we going to take care? Like, suppose there is some kind of a breakage or repair that needs on the bridge and it's impacting the art. Who takes the liability and how is that going to be handled?
Chris gets all of the liability and responsibility. We have great accountants that work behind the scenes to ensure that our assets get classified into the right categories and make sure that the right programs are aware of what their inventory is and what they're responsible for owning. So that actually would not be impacted.
Thank you. Councilmember Forsyth?
Thank you. I think I just want to double down on Councilmember Kritzer's comments about this whole, the finance part of this. And I'm still having some mild concerns about this. I know you're going in the right direction, so maybe you and I can talk offline.
Absolutely.
But also just wanted to know if we could get this presentation, because this wasn't in our materials. So I'm kind of seeing this for the first time and still thinking about it.
Great, thanks for the feedback. And I will go ahead and, if it's okay with you, Director Cochran, ask a question about one of the proposals that is in our slides that we did have. So there's a proposal, proposed art maintenance funding that I don't think was in this deck, but it proposes a catch-up amount this year of $75,000 and then previews what would be a budget enhancement next year for approximately $50,000, again, for maintenance, and kind of describes some work that has been done previously to set up this recommendation. Oh, I'm so sorry if it was there, Brittany. I'm so sorry. Oh, you just hadn't shown it yet. Okay, anyway. So could you tell us a little bit about the recommendation?
I'll just go with anything.
Yeah, thank you, Director Cochran.
All right.
Thank you.
I'm going to speak for you. So there is, in updating this plan and working with Chris, there is awareness that there is a deferred maintenance issue. And for me personally, knowing that that case is out there and we have the ability to address it and get going on catching up on deferred maintenance, my recommendation is once they are ready with a contract to come through, that we do a budget adjustment and provide the program with funding to get caught up on their maintenance. And Chris can kind of let us know where he is in that process. I also do expect to see a budget enhancement requests coming through so that we can communicate how much we're adding to the ongoing budget to make sure that we keep up on that. So there is the art investment piece as well as the ongoing piece that we're working to right size.
Thank you. Any other questions? Councilmember Kritzer.
So I was just thinking, given some of the really good questions from my colleagues, as well as just thinking about the intent of the council when they passed the 1% for the arts, and even the discussions we've had on this in the past and people's understanding of that if it's tied to, say, a public works project or like a facilities type of project, the idea would be as we build new public facilities, we have art, right? We have more art, right? But it doesn't always, the way that it actually generates this fund and then we spend it in different ways. It's not necessarily on the actual project that generates it. So I am wondering, and so I think that looking at a different funding mechanism makes sense. But I am wondering if there's something that we might put in to incentivize us as a city when we do build new public works projects or new facilities or updates to facilities to integrate some aspect. Like, for example, if we're going to build a new building or renovate a building, to say, have a policy that says that one side of it is going to have a giant mural or we'll have, we'll integrate some sort of significant thing, which we ended up with this as, for example, the Senior Community Center with just an incredible amount, and that was part of the vision we set. But I do wonder if we're shifting to a different funding model, if we could still somehow include some sort of thing that honors that intent and actually maybe increases it, right? Like, for example, we're about to do this huge MOC project. Imagining what if we had as part of that ensuring that we do have public art, right, in the MOC.
Yeah, I think so. For the MOC, depending on one of the qualifications and things we look for is to make sure it's in a public space. So wherever that is, making sure that it's open to the public. Like right now, there is a large piece of public art in front of the current MOC. It needs some maintenance, and we'll work on that. One of the ones we'll have to look at. Yeah, so I do think that that's part of that. I think, and once we have the 6-year matrix, I think part of that is every 6 years we'll go through and talk to the different folks that are working on projects. And so the matrix that we're working on now that'll be in the plan, I work closely with the park planning manager to look and see what their parks are coming up and making sure we're doing that. And I think we're gaining better and better relationships with some of the other folks in public works and whatnot. And I think that's, and one of the reasons of having that, one of the things in the plan is to have that kind of subcommittee of different people within the city so that we're really talking to them constantly. And so hopefully not only to make sure the projects we're doing fulfill all of their requirements, but also like, what are you working on? And so we're constantly having that conversation. I do agree with you. It would be great to keep not just parks projects, which obviously I'm in parks, I talk to them all the time, but also, yeah, public works and other projects.
I appreciate the question, and just in the course of the conversation, actually looked back to the draft plan in front of us, which actually does have language that we could hold ourselves accountable to in getting this public art. That is our policy as well, that we're working on this permanent public art into bridges, corridors, public spaces as part of the city's physical development. So I appreciate the question. It's a good one. And thank you, Chris, for the response. Any other questions either for Director Cochran or the team regarding the Public Art Master Plan overall? Council Vice President and then Councilmember Parsi.
Thank you. This is for the earlier portion of the presentation. A couple of things that I absolutely love going back through when I was doing the review of the park plan was the shifting from individual projects over to the citywide system was great. Also, the artist pipeline and ecosystem focus was great. I was excited to see arts and culture as infrastructure and not as icing on the cake and decoration. When it came to the equity lens of it and making sure that we've got, and I was refreshed to hear that as city planners, that it's important to have that with an equity lens. I was curious as to how are we going to measure that, whether that is artist demographics, geographic locations, where it's going, who's going to be impacted. Has that been kind of thought or figured out at this point?
In that section, I think that there are some tactics for measuring afterwards, but often for these types of things, there's a lot of tools that the city uses, for instance, Placer AI and some of the other tools where you can gauge people's attendance at events, and this would be more like placemaking or performance or things like that, cultural events. For specific public art, there are also tools that you can use based on geocoding to find out if people are visiting specific areas. In terms of equity, I think that would be kind of aligned with the 6-year plan, which is already set in place to make sure that it is positioning art equitably throughout the county. But as you continue to grow the program, then that is something that, again, Chris and his team have to thoughtfully think about in terms of where art gets placed. We, in our community questionnaire, we got a lot of great feedback on where people want to see art. And surprisingly, a lot of it is the downtown center or is transit. People do want to see art in their neighborhoods, but they also want to see art in the common centers. So it's kind of balancing and prioritizing, what we're hearing, where art really makes sense. But then ongoing surveys are also another tactic to be able to, go back every couple of years and do people feel like the plan is being fulfilled in the way that it was promised. Are they seeing the movement in their neighborhoods? Are they seeing art in their everyday spaces? So there's, multiple tactics to measure.
And I'd just like to add to that from a quantitative perspective, a couple of good examples is Equity of Artists, doing an assessment of the artists that have been commissioned. Many cities will do that, every 5 to 7 years. Measuring the impact of a temporary installation, that there are surveys that actually measure, and they're usually intercepts, the social impact of a temporary installation or an installation in a neighborhood. Are people gathering? Are they talking to each other? What impact did that have on themselves and the friends that they brought? And then obviously the economic impact. So those types of quantitative measurements, along with kind of the qualitative and looking at the geographic equity of the art itself and the artists that are being commissioned, is really important as well.
Just to add a little bit onto that is the programs that we're already having, and we do need to get better at. One of the things, and in the plan, is to make sure that we're getting this down, but one of the, and doing more of those post surveys and things of who are impacted by the programs, but things like the Public Art Intensive Eastside, which is our intensive training program that we've, I guess, 7 years of that program. We have seen a lot of what we've seen is anecdotal, but we need to get kind of dig down on those numbers. But we're seeing people who are coming from being a studio artist are now being professional public artists. We're hiring more people from that program each and every year. And the folks that we are hiring are more diverse. Their first time. That program was created as an entry point for folks that didn't have that opportunity before, and we're seeing that it's really working. And so being able to prove that with backing information is something we're going to work on along with this plan.
Thank you, Chris. I appreciate that additional comment set. Thanks for filling that out.
Councilmember Parsi.
I was wondering if, so now looking at the art placemaking and public realm, I was wondering if this would be your preferred opportunity for council to share feedback on the types of arts. I noticed that there are certain types of arts that maybe not included, that we have opportunities to explore, like music, like gardens, like art that is more integrated with nature, like living art. And I was wondering if that would be a potential for us. Would you prefer to receive an email about it, or is this a good forum to discuss it?
I'm happy to get it whatever makes sense for this meeting, but yeah, always getting it through email is great, to our director.
Great. Yeah, I think you can send it to the director, and it can be added to the feedback. Great. Councilmember Procria?
Thank you for presenting this. I'm totally in favor of creating a separate, art investment fund of our CIP. I just have a slight concern that maybe over the next few years, we would actually see a dip in arts funding if we were to consider the MOC as a part of the 1%. I'm just reading the 1991 ordinance on the 1% for the arts and looking at the section on qualifying capital improvement project. To the best of my understanding, it looks like the MOC probably would fall under that, as it costs more than $100,000 and does not involve the construction or repair, whatever, of public streets, sidewalks, parking facilities, and just taking 1% of that. That's more than what we have proposed. I'm just wondering if we have considered this.
Public Works is aware. So yes, that was part of, looking at future projects. The MOC is sort of, a once-in-a-lifetime type of projects. We also have some other larger projects, the Teen Center being one, the fire station being another. But even so, it still would not provide sort of the consistency that we're looking for. And the predictability, so the consistency and the predictability of the funding. Removing the obligation off of the MOC, but providing sort of more direct funding straight into sort of the art program, it equates to about the same over the 6-year period. So it's something we're aware of and have kind of, been playing with. What opportunities does it provide art? What opportunities does it provide us to save a little on some of the infrastructure side and get a little bit more building done?
It's a great math question. Thank you so much. Councilmember Kritzer?
Yeah, I have a different question, but I'm going to follow up on Councilmember Pecria's question just to say, I would be interested to know what we will, you mentioned that it would be, if you spread it out over the time, it would be about equivalent, but I would be interested to know, what we would project in the upcoming years as that 1% based on the types of projects that are in the pipeline right now, just so we know. And also how that math works, that it actually would be equivalent if we spread it out. One question or thought that I have on the general plan that I just wanted to raise, as you mentioned about kind of geographic equity, but it does seem like in the plan there are phases of priority locations. And I am wondering about that, with Sammamish River Corridor and Redmond, downtown Redmond Urban Center as like the first phase, then Bear Creek Corridor and West Redmond neighborhoods, and then kind of phase 3 over Lake and South Redmond, which is, I think, I can see, I guess I'm interested to hear a little bit more about the thinking on that, because I could also see there being a piece of the plan just in terms of the phasing or how we start to execute on it to make sure that we do, especially if we wanted to set goals, but very tangible outcome goals that, every one of our kind of major urban centers and some of our major neighborhoods get some piece of new public art, within the upcoming years. So if you can speak to that, I'd be curious.
And that's just where we select where art is going and just making sure that it gets in the different neighborhoods. Yeah, so, oh, did you?
Sorry.
Great.
Some of the priorities, I'll just mention real quick, and then you can jump in, Chris, came from the community surveys. We asked that question, where do you want to see art? And there was, pretty clear delineation between some of the priority areas that we talked about. So one thing we'll follow up with is a complete breakdown of the survey. So I think that'll be helpful, so you can kind of see how it responds back to some of the things that we prioritized. Chris, did you have anything to add?
Yeah, and so I think, and what isn't in the that you weren't able to see yet is that 6-year matrix. Right now, there's a placeholder in it, and we'll share that as well. But that's kind of using what is in the plan and what the recommendations are from the community, but also looking at what the priorities from our other plans and also from what projects are actually happening now. And so it is a little bit of a balance, but definitely thinking about how do we get it through different neighborhoods. And now that our GIS, I mentioned this at the PS, but we now have this GIS map that doesn't just show the city owned, but is also showing those owned by Sound Transit, King County Library, and some private development. It's also really showing us the balance of there are definitely big blank spots, and how do we fill those?
Yeah, and thank you. I appreciate it, and I appreciate that we did it based on community feedback. I would just say, especially given the Phase 3 opportunity-driven being really Overlake and then South Redmond, which I would put kind of, is an emerging neighborhood, and it's like where most of our growth is going to go. And so some of the people who don't live there yet, but will live there, didn't have the opportunity to fill out the survey. So I'd just make sure that we keep that in mind.
I'm going to chime in just to respond to that to say I really appreciate the question. The response does concern me if it is just based on the feedback, but I will tell you when I wrestled with it, when I read it, I made an assumption, and maybe my assumption was wrong, but I'll offer it now just in case it's useful, is I made the assumption that we're not going to invest just yet in these neighborhoods that are experiencing the redevelopment because it's just getting torn up through the redevelopment. That would be a perfectly acceptable answer based on my lived experience in a neighborhood that is redeveloping. But yes, folks don't have a chance to tell us how much they want art yet there. Thank you for bringing up the question. And Council Vice President.
Thank you, President Stewart. And that was kind of one of the pressing, one of the motivators behind my question about how are we measuring equity? Because equity isn't based on just popular opinion, nor does it mean equally, that we have equal amounts of art here and here. With the amount of art that is within our downtown corridor, because of our phenomenal partnerships that we have with transportation, with CBOs, we've got a considerable amount of art here throughout the downtown corridors, then making sure that our newer neighborhoods are getting it as well. Thanks.
Great. Any other feedback for the team on the plan? I think that where we're leaving things, let me check my notes here. I think where we're leaving things is the team is going to continue to integrate the feedback in the final version of the Public Art Master Plan. And Director Cochran, I believe, is going to bring back an ordinance that we can review that integrates the funding proposal as we've been discussing. There's general interest in moving forward with that. And we'd also be interested in seeing the math related to the MOC's version of 1%. That's a great question. Did I leave anything out for the group? Councilmember Forsyth.
Possible teen center as well.
And the possible teen center 1%. Thank you. All right. Well, thank you so much, team. Really appreciate it. And thank you for coming to Redmond to help us out with this awesome project. Really appreciate it. Thank you, everyone. The fourth item on our agenda tonight is Vision Blueprint 2050. And we have the team from Planning and Community Development coming to the table. Looks like we have Deputy Director Seraphy Allen, Glenn Coyle, and Jeff Churchill. Welcome, team.
Thank you, and good evening. Glenn Coyle is here to brief the council on a strategic planning document, as we called it, Vision Blueprint 2050. Staff is seeking approval by resolution on the consent agenda on July 7th, and we're here to answer some of the questions you had put at the committee meeting. So Glenn, I'll turn it over to you.
Good evening, council members. I am Glenn Coyle, senior planner in the Long Range Planning Team. Tonight we'll be reviewing the Vision Blueprint 2050. We'll provide a briefing. We provided a briefing. It's kind of late for me, sorry. I'm usually asleep at this time. We provided a briefing on May 19th, Committee of the Whole, and council requested a study session to further review. We are looking for feedback on the plan and for council to provide direction to staff on improving the plan by resolution. So, this strategic plan documents the city's capital investment strategy, which will be referred to as the CIS, and serves as the nexus between the vision, goals, and capital facilities policies in the Redmond 2050 Comprehensive Plan and the city's capital investment program, known as the CIP, another acronym, and the two-year budget. The primary purpose was to update the old Blueprint 2030 so that the plan and horizon goes out to the year 2050, consistent with the comprehensive plan and adopted functional plans. So what is the CIS? The capital investment strategy is not just a document, but it is also a process. It incorporates policies such as from the Redmond 2050 Comp Plan and the Community Strategic Plan, and it describes projects and funding strategies compiled from adopted functional plans. All this is collected in this document called the Blueprint 2050. And this slide just shows how the CIS funnels into the 6-year CIP, into the biannual budget, and then ultimately into our capital projects and construction kind of list. And this slide highlights the purpose of the plan at the high level. It implements the vision from Redmond 2050, identifies actions needed to carry out the vision, summarizes capital facility improvements, sequencing costs and anticipated revenues, and guides decisions about infrastructure investment. And so, since the plan was last drafted, the city has adopted a new comprehensive plan, so the plan needed to be updated to include new growth targets, Redmond 2050 themes, climate resiliency and greenhouse gas reduction goals, the concept of complete neighborhoods, middle housing and high-rise development, and perhaps most importantly for the Vision Blueprint 2050, updated functional plans with new projects. And then this last slide just highlights the structure and format of the plan. The first section is the introduction and includes the vision and comp plan policies and the list of functional plans used for this. Chapter 1 shows the accomplishments since 2013 and summarizes existing facilities and infrastructure. Chapter 2 summarizes key improvements identified from functional plans. And Chapter 3 summarizes funding strategies identified in functional plans and financial strategies. So with that, staff has prepared an issues matrix for your packet tonight to respond to council questions, and staff is seeking direction in order to prepare a resolution for council action at a future business meeting. And with that, I turn it back to the chair.
Thank you so much. Appreciate you all being here. Council, who would like to kick off the conversation? I'll go ahead and jump in to get us started, I guess. Thanks so much. And I appreciate the work in the matrix also. I'm really excited to have this document and to have a chance to update it as we move forward. I think I shared in our committee touch that this isn't a document that the council had a lot of interaction with in the prior version, but now we have so many fresh plans. It makes a lot of sense that we have a fresh one of these. My questions are mostly about the timing of it all and how we will maintain this moving forward, kind of helping us set the expectations for when we should get involved and when we can anticipate opportunities to update the plan. So from my read of the plan, As you all described, it contains all of the things that we have already agreed to. And it's a bit of a funny timing because we're in a budget year. We haven't yet made the next CIP, which will be the first one post Redmond 2050. And we have a park plan update coming along, and a couple of other things. So the timing of it all is a bit awkward. So could you help me understand, if we adopt this next month, then we work on the budget this year, when do we see this again and have a chance to integrate the decisions that we make about the next CIP, for instance, and have them integrated into this document so that we can use it for planning moving forward?
I'll try. So one of the challenges with this document is that it's always kind of a moving target. So there is never really a perfect time for it. When we had scoped this out, it was during Redmond 2050, and I think we had originally had hoped that it would have been finalized last year or slightly after the Redmond 2050 adoption. But there was also functional plans being updated where that information feeds in. And, one of the challenges is that none of those are all different timelines. So as you noted, the park plan was updated first in our Redmond 2050 process. A couple other plans were done right at Redmond 2050, which was like perfect timing. But then we had some other plans that just got approved. The capital facilities plan, the fire functional plan. So trying to get those all sequenced, But the bigger goal was to really have this before the next CIP process so that there was kind of a higher level document that we could kind of refer to as we go into the next CIP process. That said, the general cadence of this fitting into our regular CIP budget process is that after the budget is approved, that the CIS, this blueprint document, or the overall process would be kind of reevaluated and updated. That in turn would then start, like the rest of staff, to then start working on the CIP, which, before it even comes to council, is occurring in behind the scenes for about 6 to 8 months, even before, it comes to this part of council. So we're trying to get it back into that sequence. And that was kind of the ideal on the Blueprint 2030. The document itself, as noted in the issues matrix, wasn't specifically updated, but that process still occurred during all our CIP processes where, a lot of the staff, we would review the CIS overall and then start to update the CIP. So I don't know if anybody wants to add anything else.
I think the important part I would just highlight is that the idea is that council would have opportunities to update this in the non-budget years. So the next time would be in 2027.
Thank you, and I appreciate, Glenn, your response that it's tricky generally. There's also connection in this document to the fiscal policies, which is another thing that the council is updating currently. So I will say for my part, I would be happy to schedule the time in off-year budgets and even maybe direct via the fiscal policies that we already have cracked open at the moment, that council does update this in the off years. Because it provides such a great home base for what comes next. I can imagine being a new council member or a new planning commissioner or any number of things, and for us to be able to say, here's the plan, here's how it all fits together. That's what the purpose of this document is, but as it gets outdated, it gets less and less useful for that reason. So I appreciate your feedback on that. Are there other comments or questions from the council? Councilmember Kritzer?
Thank you, and thank you for your question, Council President Stewart. I think I had kind of a similar reflection looking at this, of just that piece with the timing, and I'd mentioned this in committee because it does reference, for example, fiscal policies that we're updating. Also, actually, just thinking about tonight, we just had this robust discussion about our public arts master plan, and also in particular a commitment to fund that as part of the CIP. Public art doesn't show up at all in this plan. So that might be something, if it's something that we are committing to and have a plan on, it'd be great to have a reference to it here. But is also something that we're actively working on, and so will become one of those many plans that are kind of informing this big super plan as it seems to be. So I guess that would be my thought. Although I will say, just having had this discussion, I think it might make sense before we do it, if we know we're going to be adopting this CIP-oriented public arts commitment, to be able to reference it within this broader plan.
And there was a challenge of terms of how much detail to put into this. Like, is it really specific to projects, or do we get at the programmatic level? And we know when it comes to the budget, there's always been a little bit of a back and forth on the CIP. You know, do projects go into more of a programmatic type process, or is it specific discrete projects, you know, like the senior center or the Redmond Connector? So, and those kind of shift over time too. So there was a little bit of a challenge, like, well, how much of the programmatic stuff do we include in this? And I think that's something we have to continue to revisit.
Yeah, and I would just say, I think, because I think we are having actually, if based on what we just discussed, a shift of saying we are going to intentionally have a dedicated part of the CIP, so what our capital investment strategy is over time. Our vision is going to be including investing in public art as infrastructure in a lot of ways. So I would just say that if we can find a place there, it would make sense.
Councilmember Parsi?
I was wondering if we could, if we come back with a draft of this document, if it would be possible to align the components called out with some goals or metrics. For example, I see that we have called out investments for a 12 million fire station and a 38 million police building. And, you know, when I think of it, for example, school, a $20 million school can be a very small but like high-end school, but it could also be like a more humble school with much larger capacity. When I see a dollar amount in front of a just item, it doesn't really give me an idea of what is the capacity, what are the kind of outcomes that we can expect from it. I don't know if it would be useful for others to kind of be able to have some goals associated with items listed, but it would be really helpful for me to kind of understand what outcomes are we anticipating with each item.
I can add, I think one of the important things to highlight is that this is really a roll-up from our functional plans, which really have a lot more detail on these specific projects. But again, a lot of these projects look out 20, 25 years, so they're not really well-defined. You know, for the other planning processes, there are some like very high-level best guesstimates of costs and everything. But I wouldn't call this like really a document that, you know, with just some surety in terms of the numbers. Like, they're really just a roll-up of a lot of existing plans. But for example, if you're talking about like police facilities and stuff, I really refer back to, say, the capital facilities plan, or maybe some of the police strategic documents, to really get a better sense of what those visions are for those kind of facilities.
Glenn, can I ask a follow-up to that? So hearing what the council member was saying, if those functional plans have some of the high-level, seems like key indicators that go along with the numbers, sounds like maybe the request is to edit the document to include at a high level those. If they don't, are you okay with leaving it as potentially as it is, because it's the functional plan leaves it as a high level, to Glenn's point?
Yeah, definitely. And even if it's possible to include a reference, that would be great, because I'm not sure if all of us are familiar with, if I see this, what can I look for to be able to find the functional plans and kind of find more details. So if there's at least a reference, it would be really helpful.
Yeah, absolutely. I see several folks who wanted to chime in, so I'm going to go with the Council Vice President.
Thank you, Council President. It was more of a technical possible solution. If it does get referenced, is there a way to hyperlink to the plan? So then you could just click on, and then it links to it.
If it's online and it's published, there's a way to do that technology-wise, yeah. I know the city's pretty good about having permalinks, that's been the reluctance. I don't want to get too technical, but sometimes there's a reluctance to put hyperlinks into documents just because the references change. But I think lately, with, communications and everything, done a good job of just having permanent links for documents. So, but I try as a best practice, as best I can, to add links where it's feasible, yeah. So that's something that's, can be done.
Appreciate that. Yeah, Mayor Bernie.
I think, thank you, Glenn, for all of that. I think part of what the challenge is that this is kind of a broad picture, and there's a lot of documents that serve it, and perhaps maybe, I don't know when Director Cochran's coming back just to kind of talk about the CIP, but maybe just kind of putting all the puzzle pieces together about how all these things work together would be helpful to the council. And I know Glenn kind of talked about it a little bit at the beginning, but I think that's trying to understanding all these different pieces. What we don't want to do is be repetitive in the work that's been done in all the functional plans. He's really trying to put together this large, broad overview without as much detail as going to be in the functional plan. So I'm trying to think of like what would be helpful for the council, but also actually a functioning, not to say functional plan, but a functioning document that's not too cumbersome. And so maybe there's some more background we can share that would be helpful.
Yeah, so I'm gonna chime in to say that the power of this document is that it's a roll-up and it does offer the opportunity to sync back to the other plans. For my part, and anticipating that we are adopting some version of this year, I've already put on my 2027 work plan list that we're gonna update this next year, and I've captured the notes of the categories of things that we'd like to see updated for next year. So I think the question in the short term is for now, I did hear one suggestion to wait until we have the public art ordinance across the finish line. Is there more interest in that, or is there more interest in proceeding with next month and then just adding that to the list to add into the amendments next year? So Councilmember Kritzer.
So just to clarify, I wasn't saying we should delay. I was just saying we should mention somewhere in the plan, add the words like public art, as a goal. If we could add like a sentence or something in there that just references that we are, having a public arts master plan, or that we're going to be investing in public art.
Yeah, I think we could add language that could say upcoming edits or potentially edits that the council has looked at. But we would prefer to get the plan adopted as it goes into this doom loop of waiting for the next one and then waiting for the next thing. So
absolutely,
if that works for you, council member, we could add that.
I'm also, I'm okay adopting and then amending in the future. I thought if we added a few words to reference would be fine. But I think based on what you were saying of setting the goal to have a cadence for next year for updating, I'm fine with passing this as is.
Okay, well, we have a suggestion on the table and amenable staff, so thumbs up if you're interested in having a sentence or so added that does reference the development of the public art master plan, and that we'll come back to that. Okay, thank you, Deputy Director. I appreciate your team on that. So are there any other suggestions of that nature before we consider moving this forward to a vote in July? Okay, and with that one change, are there any objections to just having it on the consent agenda? I'm seeing thumbs up, but if we could get a preview from the team, that would be helpful of that one additional change.
Fantastic. Are you saying you'd like us to send it to you before it comes on the consent agenda so you can see it?
Yeah, if you could just send a quick email that's like, here's where we integrated your change. Yep. Snapshot, page number.
Can do.
Yeah. Councilmember Parsi.
I also had a question. I see a number of mentions of wastewater, and I remember recently we heard from in our public comments about gray water usage. I don't know if this would be a potential opportunity to also add a sentence or two to kind of go towards that goal of using gray water, or if this is not.
Yeah, so this plan is a roll-up. So we do have a wastewater systems plan that I'll refer you to generally. And then, again, we're going to be working on the wastewater CIP and all of that later this year. So I would say hang on to that note, and when we come back around in 2027, let us know. Okay, with that, I think we have a plan. Thank you, team. Really appreciate you staying late and helping us out tonight. Appreciate it. And the last item on our agenda tonight is council talk time. I have just a couple quick items. First, wanted to let everyone know we had a quick check-in with the staff in the executive office. They are in the process of getting a posting for the legislative coordinator, so that position will be posted very soon. And then, of course, council leadership, we owe you also, in parallel, an update to the ombud process proposal. So we'll bring that back in the next few weeks, so that should we be able to hire someone to support the council in the next few weeks, that we'll have that going in parallel. There was a request to make sure we cover some of the key events that are coming up in the next couple weeks. So of course, this Friday, 2 o'clock, downtown Park, the commemorative sign is being installed at 2 p.m. Council Vice President Nueva Camina will speak on the council's behalf, and everyone is invited to go and celebrate. The remainder of the World Cup events are listed at redmond.gov/soccer, and that also will get you links to some of the community events that we funded through our various partner organizations and local businesses. Also, a quick reminder to the council that we've been invited to a retirement celebration next Wednesday afternoon for Tiza Rutherford. If you're able, I know I will be there to stop by and just thank Tiza for her incredible work here in our city. I have one small proposal I also wanted to get the council's kind of feedback on, thinking back on the conversation and the decision we made last week regarding land use regulations for commercial drone delivery. One of the questions that was coming up was about our neighboring jurisdictions. And as I know that some of us have had a chance to speak with our fellow councils in neighboring jurisdictions, but if there is interest, I think that council leadership could, on behalf of our council, send a message to our neighboring councils that quickly highlights, this came to us, this is what we did, these are a couple policy questions we have moving forward, and as your neighbor, there might be opportunities to align policy questions down the road. So also just wanted to gauge if there is interest in a communication like that. Oh, immediate thumbs up, so love the feedback, great. With that, my cup is full. Are there any other items for council talk time? Councilmember Kritzer and then Councilmember Parsi.
One quick follow-up item following up on a discussion that happened at FAC today. Council President brought up, as we were discussing the state legislative agenda, that we may want to add in doing a federal agenda, since we now have federal lobbyists. And so just wanted to bring that up as something, I'd be happy to put it on the FAC agenda and kind of look at that, but I just wanted to check in with everyone about whether that is something that the council's interested in, and or also with council leadership, if there is interest across the boards, whether council leadership will lead on that or whether FAC chair will. So I'm happy to play my role, but also just wanted to kind of check in on that and gauge interest. Is there interest in us scheduling some time to have that conversation in FAC and or other places? All right, well, I'm seeing them, so I guess I'll touch base with council leadership to just figure out if it's best for me to schedule it in my committee or whether you all will be taking that on.
That sounds great. And Mayor Bernie, this has come up a couple of the last times that it's come up a few different ways. And when we did have our check-in with our federal lobbyists, this was mentioned again there too. So I really appreciate the offer, and let's talk about the timing of it all. Is it best to get going on something like that now, or would it be appropriate for like a 2027? I guess it kind of depends on the congressional schedule, but happy to talk with you and the team more about that at agenda setting on Thursday. Okay, great.
Sorry, just one follow-up on that. I'll also just note, as precedent for that, as I noted when I was chairing ETP last year, and we decided to create a federal agenda for ETP for the first time, we ended up looking at Bellevue's federal agenda. So Bellevue does have kind of a process like that. So if we do end up pursuing that, that might be something interesting to look at.
Forsyth, did you have a comment on that?
Yeah, just on that real quick. I serve on the AWC Federal Policy Committee, so AWC also has one. I will share that, in my opinion, we backslid a little bit this year, so I would look at the prior years if we're going to look at that as well.
Okay, thank you. Other items for council talk time. Councilmember Soni.
So I had my Parks and Environment Sustainability Committee agenda setting. We do have time on the committee, so if there is any other committee that's looking for some extra items to be added, please let me know.
Thank you, much appreciated. Councilmember Kritzer.
Sorry, I have one other item that I keep meaning to bring up at council talk time, and I just wanted to raise in the context of also us hopefully working on getting that new legislative coordinator hired. One thing our previous legislative coordinator did was to help us to keep track of all the community event invitations we get, in addition to kind of the things that go on our calendar as city events. So in the interim, I was just thinking that maybe we could just try as a practice at council talk time, if any of us know of events that are going to be coming up in the upcoming 2 weeks that you saw or that you're planning to go to. I was thinking about this after we ended up with 5 council members at the youth summit, that it'd just be good for us to be able to share, hey, here's one that's going to be on my agenda. Not that we should do it tonight, but I just wanted to kind of propose that in the interim, and then hopefully when we get our new legislative coordinator, we can return to that practice of the ongoing list of upcoming community events.
Thank you. Councilmember Parsi, did you have another item for talk time?
I had a question, and I wanted to gauge everyone's thoughts about. So when items come to the council, and when we need to make decisions, oftentimes, with limited time and decisions need to be made relatively in a short time, I find it oftentimes helpful when I have the list of potential concerns listed out clearly. So for example, an example of something that came to the council and I felt like I could benefit from potential concerns being more clearly listed would be the drone policy. I think there were some examples around noise, like noise levels and decibels and frequency. There were examples with that could have potential health concerns, as we're also considering noise ordinances and things like that. So I was thinking if others would also find it beneficial to have a section dedicated to potentially what are some of the Redmond 2050 goals that maybe we would be walking back from with each decision. And, each decision that we make has both strong positives and potentially negatives. And it would be helpful for us to know what are the potential consequences to make sure we're on the same page, we're aware, and we're making decisions that are equitable, and we can make sure that the consequences are evenly distributed. So just wanted to run that by you and see if that's something that would be valuable or not.
I'll ask a clarifying question, if I may, Councilmember Parsi. Where are you interested in having this information presented?
For example, in the memo where we have the information about the budget, I think this could be a section in the memo document that kind of highlights here's the pros and cons, but this is like about Redmond 2050, more like concerns.
Any feedback for Councilmember Parsi? Councilmember Forsyth?
I think it's an interesting idea, especially because a lot of the times we see the impacts if we don't do this is just a kind of generic, then we won't get the thing. So I think a bit more detailed impacts would be, it's something I've wanted for a long time, and I feel like we got better about it for a little while, and then we kind of went back to what we're currently seeing now. So I don't know if it needs to be a massive shift, but just a more thoughtful response in that section would be helpful, I think.
Thank you. Was there another hand on this side?
I was going to say like the exact same thing about the that section of the memo.
Okay. Go ahead, Councilmember Kritzer.
Yeah, I would say, I think also typically in memos, we have like a community engagement touches section, but only if there's been deep engagement do we get kind of like that summary of community feedback. So that might also just be something that, where we would be able to get that information. Also, I think if there's a deeper kind of pros versus cons or research, that might be an interesting discussion of a job for our new legislative coordinator on certain issues for us, if it's more like council members want some additional background research.
Yeah, I think that the template that our memos, as was pointed out, the template does have space for that. Maybe we could have a conversation with Mayor Burney about potentially beefing up, making better use of that piece on the agenda, particularly in some areas, and when needed, potentially having the legislative coordinator help flesh out policy considerations is potentially on the table, something we could consider. Yeah. So for now, I think that if it's okay with you, Councilmember Parsi, I'll take that, council leadership will take that feedback, think about how the ledge coordinator might be helpful. And the administration's here and has heard kind of your feedback, and we can talk about it some more. Okay, awesome. Anything else for talk time tonight? Councilmember Prakriya.
I was going to follow up with this offline, but I thought it might be good to raise here, which is in response to what you just said about potentially drafting a letter to fellow councils about, our experience with what happened with commercial drones. I'm going to be representing Redmond tomorrow in place of Council President Stewart at the Sound Cities Association Public Issues Committee, and this does kind of feel like a public issue. I was wondering if, this is something I should bring up potentially in good of the order.
Yeah, if there's a good of the order, that seems appropriate. Yeah, thanks for thinking of that. And with that, I'll actually wrap us up by saying congratulations to the soon-to-be graduate, and we look forward to seeing you next week. And hope you have an amazing graduation weekend. And we are adjourned. Thanks, everybody.